Students, good evening. I am in my car, parked in the garage, because it's the only place that I can talk history and not wake anybody up at night. So that's what we're doing. I thought it would be helpful for me to talk through some of the documents that I'm asking you to use as sources for your essay, for your week 2 essay. So I'm not going to do multiple documents per video. This video will just be me looking at Abraham Lincoln's response to Chief Justice Roger Taney. He had just led the U.S. Supreme Court in deciding that a guy named Dred Scott was a slave, and the Supreme Court decided in this case that blacks were not citizens of the United States and therefore were not entitled to equal protection under the law. In fact, because they weren't citizens according to this Supreme Court case, they weren't entitled to any rights whatsoever. So a completely disgusting, disgraceful, un-American, and bad, in every meaning of the word, decision by the Supreme Court. That's the background. This is Abraham Lincoln responding to this court case decision. At this point, not many people outside of Illinois had heard of Abraham Lincoln. He hadn't been president yet. He was running for senator. Again, not many people had heard of this dude named Lincoln. I want to start because I think his argument, Lincoln's argument, really picks up about halfway down the page. You can't see that on video, but where he says this, he says, and this is the staple argument of both the Chief Justice and the Senator for doing this obvious violence to the plain, unmistakable language of the Declaration. And of course, he's talking about the Declaration of Independence. This is where he starts talking about the authors of the Declaration of Independence. He says, I think the authors of that noble instrument meaning declaration, intended to include all men. And what's he talking about when he says all men? He's talking about the phrase, all men are created equal. So Lincoln's answering, who did these guys mean when they said all men? Lincoln says, I think the authors meant to include all men. All men. But they did not intend to declare all men equal in all respects. Then he goes on to say, these guys did not mean to say that all men are equal in color or in intellect or in moral capacity. He said, people are all different. They're not equal in these different respects. And then they defined with tolerable distinctness, they stated clearly what they meant by equal in certain inalienable rights, in which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This they said, and this they meant. So Lincoln is saying the founders did not mean that all men were equal in all respects whatsoever, because we know that's not true. Not everybody's the same intelligence level. Not everybody's at the same athletic ability. Not everybody's has the same hair. Not everybody's got a sweet beard. Everybody's different in those respects. But he says, in terms of rights, that's what the founders were talking about. Again, this is Abraham Lincoln's view. Okay? Not sure why I just saluted. Then he goes on to say, let's see, what else? I like this. At the bottom of this first page that I gave you, he said, they meant to set it up as a standard maxim, or a maxim is like a slogan or a motto for free society, which should be familiar to all, revered by all, constantly looked to, constantly labored for, and even though never perfectly attained, constantly approximated, and thereby constantly spreading and deepening its influence and augmenting the happiness and value of life to all people of all colors everywhere. Love that idea. Lincoln is saying the phrase all men are created equal is not something that they had already achieved at the founding of the country. He's saying it's not something we've achieved now. He's speaking in 1850s. And you could argue, hey, we haven't achieved that in 2020. People would argue either side of that question now, current day. He's saying the phrase all men are created equal is something we should constantly strive for, even though we're never going to get there. It should be our guide. It should be our North Star. Oh, I like that. I love that idea. and then he puts the nail in it, finishes it off, and he says the assertion, the claim that all men are created equal was of no use in making us independent from Britain. He said it wasn't put in the Declaration of Independence to help us get free of Britain. Its authors meant it to be, thank God. It is now proving itself a stumbling block to those who in after times would seek to turn free people back into the hateful path of despotism. Despotism is another word for tyranny. They knew that prosperity of a country was likely to breed tyrants. Lincoln says Jefferson and the other founders put the statement, all men are created equal, in the Declaration of Independence for two reasons. First, to be something constantly strived for, to be a goal for free society, and second, to be a constant hurdle for anyone who would try to take over a free country and rule with an iron fist, become a tyrant, become a dictator, because people would always be looking to that truth, that maxim, to use Lincoln's word, and saying, no, you're not better than us in any way. You may be the leader, but all men are created equal. That means all men are equal in rights, and that means I, Joe, citizen, have the same rights as you, and that limits your power in office. It comes back to consent of the governed. Lincoln seems to say that the founders were good men who had a good purpose. He says this, let's sum it up by saying this. Lincoln said that the founders said all men are created equal. They meant all men, white and black men, are created equal. And Lincoln says they were right when they said that. All right, I hope this helps. If it makes you have more questions, ask me. Love to talk history. Bye.